welcome to the John H. Ames reading series at the Jane Pope Geske Heritage Room of Nebraska Authors. My mic is working, isn't it? Wow, that's great. I'm Deb Arns. I'm the curator of the Heritage Room. And for those of you who aren't familiar with us, it's our mission to preserve and celebrate and share works by and about Nebraska authors. We're supported by the Nebraska Literary Heritage Association and the Lincoln City Libraries Foundation, and we're very grateful for their help because without it, we wouldn't be able to have programs like this. The Ames Reading Series gives Nebraska authors the opportunity to share their works with the community, and this is actually the 232nd program in this series since we started in 1985. And if you're interested in seeing some of them from 1985, they're on our YouTube channel, so you can go there. And this one will be on it too, as well. Right, so this, probably in about a month, this will actually be available for viewing on YouTube, and you can share it if you'd like. So today we are delighted to welcome the author Mike Bockoven. Mike lives with his family in Grand Island, Nebraska, and has been thrilling and/or terrifying readers since 2016 with his novels FantasticLand, Pack, Killing It, and Come Knocking, which was released last year. Yeah. And personally, I will say that reading Mike's books has shown me that I actually do like to read horror. And I'm from the East Coast, so if I say horror, just know I'm saying horror. I say it a little bit differently. So I never thought I'd like horror, so kudos, Mike.
Thank you.
And he's been a horror fan from a young age. His first novel wasn't published until he was in his late 30s. And he subscribes to the idea of fitting art into the nooks and crannies of your life and continues to wake up early and stay up late to write, correct?
You have done your research, yeah.
Thank you, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna sit here with Mike and I'm just gonna ask him some questions about his books. And we are gonna make sure there's time also for you to ask him questions as well. And then he will be available, there's some books for sale in the back, and he will be available to sign your books or chat with you a little bit, okay?
Cool.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Let's go.
Let's go.
So just tell us a little bit about yourself, your connection to Nebraska, and your education. And are you a career writer, or do you have another occupation?
Okay. So I am not native Nebraskan, boo, sorry, but I have lived in Nebraska since I was very young. So for all intents and purposes, you know, I will curse the Nebraska football team with the best of them. Yes, you know? Yes. So yeah, essentially a Nebraska boy. So right now, and so I started writing, I've always had writing as part of my vocation. I started off as a journalist right out of college, did that for 7 years. I've been, you and I share a little bit of a history with Stewart Museum, where I was a marketing director for a while. And I am not a career writer, wish I was, always trying to work toward that goal. But yeah, I have 8 to 5s like everybody, and that's trying to find the time to put together, you know, novels after that is always a challenge, but it's one of my favorite parts. You know, is that I've got the public persona, and then I've kind of got this little hidden life thing going where it's like, yeah, I wrote a book where someone insert gory part here. You know, it's I've got a few novels out there, and when people find that, it's usually one of the most interesting things about me. So.
Yeah, and you can probably we talked a little bit earlier, but you could have a bad work day and then write about that person in a
No. It's never happened. No, never happened.
Never. So you have 4 published novels. So FantasticLand, which was the first one I read, came out in 2016, Pack in 2018, Killing It in 2023, and Come Knocking in 2025. So Can you give us a brief synopsis of each book, and then maybe a short reading from one of them?
Yeah, I will. Also, I can kind of break news a little bit. I don't think I've talked about this on my social media. My 5th novel, through Simon & Schuster, is coming out in February of next year. And we just have a title for that, which is Your Best Chance of Survival. And that'll be coming out soon. And I could do a little bit of a reading from that if you want to.
That would be great.
You can kind of see. But yeah, so FantasticLand was my first novel. It's a epistolary or interview-based story about kind of Lord of the Flies inspired, where a hurricane hits a Florida theme park. There are a bunch of younger people working in the theme park as the hurricane hits. They rescue them about a month and a half later, and things have gone horribly, terribly wrong. Pack is my Nebraska novel more than anything. It's about a family of hard-working Nebraskans who happen to be werewolves. Yeah. Killing It is, I have an elevator pitch for these, and sometimes the elevator pitches make me uncomfortable, so I apologize. But it's The Shining in a comedy club, but please don't compare it to The Shining. That's one of the best pieces, that sort of thing. But basically, comedians trapped in the basement in the green room of a comedy club. Guy upstairs goes a little crazy, game on, right?
Yeah.
And then Come Knocking, which came out in July, is a kind of sort of sequel to FantasticLand. It's one of those epistolary novels where it's an interview format, but this one is about a very bad night at a very large interactive theater experience in Los Angeles. So yeah, and I'll do a little bit of a reading from that.
Great.
So the premise of the reading, and you and I were talking about Stephen Graham Jones. He said he liked this part, so I need to name drop. Just drop a name real quick. But
So Stephen Graham Jones wrote The Buffalo Hunter.
Yeah, which is an amazing horror novel, and you should read it if you don't get the chance. But this is from toward the end of the book where the people who are working in the interactive theater experience are dealing with a fire on the top floor. There's kind of chaos. There's some people hitting other people, terrible things happening, and one performer was not able to save the life of another performer. So this is his lament from the end of that book, where he's talking about kind of being up in this beautiful garden area that's on fire. And he said, what I did see as I looked and as I searched were flowers in the smoke. I saw them unaffected, still beautiful. Then I saw one on fire. I don't know to this day if my brain was playing tricks or if I saw a flower burn, but my brain interpreted it as a sign that I was not going to save Lydia, a sign that this show was dead, a sign that something beautiful had died because nothing beautiful stays that way. I almost didn't find my way back to the exit, but I did. I went down the stairs, I made my way to the bar, but that's a whole different kettle of fish. I will close by saying, I think about Lydia, his coworker, every day. I've reached out to her family and I've shared many details as I feel appropriate, but it has done little to abate my substantial guilt. I told them I wish I were stronger. I wish I could have saved her. She deserved to live, she deserved to thrive, and she deserved someone better than me who could have found her in the smoke and gotten her the hell out of there. Typical last words, I know. Not eloquent, not enough. I never said I was a good poet. So that's his lament at the end of the book. Yeah. There are jokes on occasion, so they can be a little fun. But I got to grab my phone, I apologize. The fifth novel coming out is similarly bleak, unfortunately, but that's the genre in which I've decided to work. It's set, it's kind of a neo-future sort of thing set after the climate has collapsed. Okay. And so they have a billionaire who has built a bunker and stuffed it with people who he thinks can then sustain life past this climate collapse. And this is similarly a woman, the gardener in this bunker. It's her lament as to what's happened to. So I hope that setup makes a little bit of sense. I'm not describing it terribly well. And it goes. She's talking about talking directly to the people who built the bunker. Do you understand how much I loved growing things? I would have spent my life doing it and never complained, not for a second. Back before, I would always have a single plant in mind, and I was very good at knowing what a plant needed and then finding a way to give it what it needed. But that was never my favorite part. My favorite part is something you will never understand because it takes humanity and creativity and thinking beyond yourself. What I loved was how life never goes in a straight line. Never, not once. I never never grew a plant where a weed didn't try to grow too, or a bug didn't try to take a nibble. Or you plant 3 seeds in the same dirt and give the same water and the same sunlight, and each of them grows in a completely different way. The natural world, it's never this happens, then this happens, then this happens. There are billions of variables, all trying to live, all trying to thrive in a system all at once. And at no point is it not messy and not complicated and not unexpected and not beautiful. Never. But seeing that, much less understanding that, takes thinking that you can't do. It takes a brain like the one you don't have. It takes going outside of your own experience for 1 second, and you can't do that. I wonder, right before you die, if you'll understand. If you get that there will be crying and panic and pain and all that, but I wonder if you'll look out at the faces of all those who want you to die because of what you did and understand. I wonder if. So those are that. So.
And what's the name of the new book again?
It's called Your Best Chance of Survival.
Okay.
It's going to come out February 2nd, I believe, of next year. So
Yay.
I have an edit due Wednesday, so any prayers, good thoughts. If you see me out walking, yell at me to get back in my office.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Mike. Okay, so a couple questions. FantasticLand and Come Knocking, you said, that epistolary style.
Yeah.
I've heard people say oral history interview, which obviously would kind of harken back to your journalism days, maybe, right?
You nailed it.
Can you talk a little bit about why you chose that style for those two particular books?
Two big reasons. One of them is I like it's a shortcut to character. How about that? And I hate to give away a trick of the trade, but being able to talk in the first person, I find easy to establish character quickly because you have things like vocal patterns, you have things like how they say, the language they use, how they say it, the things they choose to reveal. And that leads to the second point that then it quickly becomes an unreliable narrator situation, right? So my favorite part about FantasticLand is some of the stuff that people find in it I had no intention of putting in there. And that makes me very happy that that the format is doing work that I as an author were too lazy or unequipped to do. But I really like trying to figure out how to make those voices distinct and those speech patterns distinct. And it's one of the things that I try hardest at. And so, and again, you never know if you get there. And when you're working with an editor or something, you can like, please help me make these voices distinct. And they're like, we don't know anything you don't know, so you gotta kind of make that work. But that's why I chose to do that is because it shortcut to character is kind of the big answer.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, as a non-horror reader, I thought FantasticLand was a great entry for me into the genre because there's a little bit of a disconnect. There's like you're not slammed right into the violence.
Yeah.
You're hearing about it. So
there's that famous Stephen King quote that everybody has, and I'm going to butcher it, so I'm going to paraphrase it. But is the job of a horror writer is to make you fall in love with characters and then let the monsters out. Right, that's kind of the idea is that if you're invested in at least what's happening, then when terrible things happen, you'll at least follow along and hopefully be uncomfortable and all those great things that horror may spike your cortisol levels, all the rest of it. Yeah,
keep you up at night.
Yeah.
So FantasticLand set in an amusement park, killing it in a New York City comic club, come knocking in an immersive theater production in LA. Pack in Nebraska. So which I haven't read that one yet, so that'll be next. But were these choices based on personal interests, experiences? What was that about?
You're on to me. Oh no.
I am.
Yeah.
I've read your book. So.
Yeah. No. So yeah, the FantasticLand. It's weird. I'll preface this by saying ideas are cheap. Everyone has a bunch of ideas, and that the execution is where the rubber meets the road, right? But there's always a moment when you're executing, you're like, oh, I know where this came from. I know where this started. And FantasticLand, you're right, I was at Disney with my kids. If you look at the layout of FantasticLand, it's basically the Magic Kingdom. Don't say that too loudly, Yeah. But yeah, you know when that idea hits, that it was something that stemmed from one of your interests, right? And so, yeah, the FantasticLand. Yeah, we like amusement parks. I've been to a lot of them, and they're great. I'm a lifelong fan of stand-up comedy. Always have been. Theater. I have a Little Shop of Horrors tattoo on my arm. I mean, it's that sort of thing. It's like I like. It's easier to get at the desk and write if you're writing something that you are interested in and can do some research on and not get terribly bored about. That's the thing about right now Andy Weir's a big deal with Project Hail Mary, but The Martian took just a million amount. I imagine so much research of a technical nature, and I'd be like, no, I can't do that. I don't have the interest in astrophysics to go and actually learn about astrophysics. I don't want to do that, but I can watch John Mulaney for the third time. I can watch some stand-up comedy and come up with some characters and that sort of thing. So yeah, interest does drive a good bit of what I do. Yeah.
So when you're at Walmart, are you thinking of how things ever going to go bad?
It's like
how does that work?
I'm a little bit of a natural pessimist, and I will say, like FantasticLand, I was in Disney, and one of the thoughts that happened as I'm looking around, you're seeing this giant machine of joy, and I'm looking around going, what could go wrong here? And there's a good number of things that could go very wrong in a theme park. Yeah. And I'm sure they have, they just don't tell you.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
No one has ever died at Disneyland. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. Is that
they
true?
always take them out to the parking lot to declare them dead.
So you have a heart attack, they take you out, and then they...
Yeah. No one has ever died at Disneyland. That's true.
Well, that's something I didn't know.
Yeah.
And were you a lifelong, did you go to New York and go to comedy clubs, or?
No, good question. It's much more home-based. I don't have a lot of history. I've done stand-up maybe 4 or 5 times in my life, and was moderately the crowds are very kind to me. How about that? Yeah. But Yeah, I think it's just kind of interest. I was the kid in high school driving around with a tape of George Carlin in his car. So I mean, it's something where when you are part of something artistic long enough, it sort of seeps into who you are, and you kind of understand it on a little bit of a different level, and can maybe play with it a little bit. At least that's my hope.
Yeah.
I
So you
don't know if I
take
got
things
there.
you love and you make them terrifying.
Do what you love and let the monsters
That's
out.
right. That's
Yeah,
right. That's
yeah.
right. So, as I've read these books and I really love them.
I appreciate that.
And in Fantastic Land and Come Knocking, you explore. I thought you explored the dark side of technology and social media in both of them. Smartphone use or lack thereof. Platforms like Reddit and Discord contribute to the outcomes. They read a little bit to me like cautionary tales. So I'm assuming this is intentional. And can you talk a little bit about what your thought process was with that?
Absolutely. I have a coworker who has a shirt that says social media was a mistake that I almost wanted to buy at some point. I'm not a Luddite. I spend too much time online like everybody. But the thing that I hope I'm getting at, and again, once it's out of my hands, I don't know that I can tell you how to feel about my work. I don't want to tell you how to feel about it. I can tell you what I was thinking when I was doing it. And the thing I think most bothers me about like our current state of affairs as far as the internet is concerned is that I have this terrible thing I do that I take people as they present themselves. I take people at their word, right? So if someone comes to me and says, "Hey, you're a giant POS, I'm going to kill you," as someone might do online, I think they should be held accountable for that. It's kind of a weird thought in this day and age that you stand behind what you say and you mean what you say, and that's not what the internet is, and kind of wasn't what the internet was from the beginning. I think it's a privilege of being old enough to where I remember that magic moment where I was looking something up on the internet. I remember I was looking up guitar chords for a song, and I thought, wait a second, it's not just this song, it's every song, and it's everything. And it's like, and it's the drum part, and it's the bass part, and it's this person says, and it's like I had that magic revelatory moment when I was like a sophomore or junior in high school, right? Because I'm, pushing 50 now. And that moment juxtaposed with what we did with it is just gross. I'm sorry, I find, a lot of, we found something that sells better than sex, and it's rage. We found something that that people will engage with more, and it's hating other people. And it's the sort of thing where you push that far enough, and you take that to its logical conclusion, and we might be in some trouble. I need to tell a joke now. I don't know, but yeah, that's kind of where my brain is with a lot of the stuff, especially with Come Knocking, which was basically the internet. There's shades of internet conspiracy theory and stuff like that in there. I had to do a thing that was really unpleasant with Come Knocking, where one of the characters comes in and is a shooter, and I had to go and read some manifestos to kind of get a sense of what that was, and that was probably one of the most unpleasant things I've ever done as a research project, and just like, I'm not answering your question. I'm meandering, but the internet is something is something I think about a lot, and I think we can do better.
Yeah. So, talking about going to Killing It. So, Killing It is your book about comics in New York, or kind of comics.
The one I compared to The Shining. Why did I do that?
Yeah, and it includes some characters that to me seem like amalgamations of prominent comedians who have turned out to be maybe not so great personally. And there's some really interesting passages where some of the characters talk about their own wrestling with separating art from the person, which I think a lot of people are dealing with now when some of our heroes and some of our genres turn out to be not so great. So can you speak to this a little bit? Because I felt like that was a pretty big part of that book, in addition to all the slaughter. But
in addition to some of the gory bits. That's an eternal thing that everybody fights with, and I think everybody has their own lines that they don't want to cross. It's a really fun, robust conversation to have in like the specific. It's like, well, can you still listen to Michael Jackson's music? Despite what or whoever, pick your person who's had allegations or whatever. But it's kind of exhausting in the aggregate. Just the idea that the older I get, the more I think if something brings you joy, you should maybe hang on to that joy as much as you can. But at the same time, you've got the other side, right? So when I was writing Killing It, it was more of a let's try. Killing It is not epistolary. I don't have that trick that we talked about earlier, where I can make the characters kind of speak for themselves. I had to show and not tell. I had to do all that sort of thing. Kind of build a character, and I found that was an interesting thing to take somebody who was obviously not a good person, had done some things that were terrible, were about to, to be shunned by their community for it, which is a good thing, which absolutely should happen, and have him, do some mildly heroic things, in the service of the story. But I really like it when, to speak to the larger issue, I really like it when creative communities speak and know who they are and know what they will tolerate, and we talk about these literary things. We were talking about I think it was I brought up I can't think of his name right now. So some of the authors that are beloved that have had issues about them, and it's really interesting to me and intellectually interesting to watch the reaction of the different parts of the literary community. And most of all, I found literary communities to be very welcoming and very kind and generous places. They certainly have been to me, and to watch them grapple with that is I find really interesting, and where those lines are and how they shift. And
I liked in that book too, where you had one section where two of the comedians were dealing with it. It would be even, I mean, it's hard enough as a fan to deal with some of this stuff, but if you're working in that field and you're these are your heroes, these are the people who have sort of moved and shaped things for you, and then you have to deal with it. Yeah,
and the other thing I'll say about it is I love when people think about those sort of things, because it shows how do I want to put it? It shows thinking about the art as part of like this larger picture, and I think that's valuable. I think it's very easy to take an artist and just not think about it at all, I'll give you an example. I might be wrong on this, but Neil Diamond's Sweet Caroline. Every time people are there in Sweet Caroline, he wrote it about a 13-year-old. Like, ooh, it's gross. But you think about that, and you're like, okay, so is it? Where's the joy? Can I go to a baseball game and go and be happy? I don't know. Everyone has their line. Yeah. So I find that endlessly interesting.
Yeah. Well, I like that you put that in there.
Thank you.
It was good for me. So let's get back to Nebraska. Yeah. So obviously PAC, but what influence has being in Nebraska, being a Nebraskan, living on the plains, how has it influenced your writing?
The plains, so PAC, which is kind of my love letter to Nebraska. I talked earlier about that moment when a book is going to happen, or an idea is kind of turning into something. I almost said the word festering. It's festering in my brain into something. And there was a moment when I was out in western Nebraska. I married a western Nebraska girl, and we were out at some hotel somewhere, and I remember seeing two deck chairs, and they were pointed at a wooded area, like for no reason. There wasn't a grill there. There wasn't a cooler there. Nothing. Just two people sat there staring at the forest. And I was like, "What are you doing? Why does that exist? What is that about?" And then it kind of concocted, and a piece of music hit with something else, and I had an idea for a novel. Nebraska's great like that, because you see some, especially in small towns. Like I graduated high school in Milford. You see some weird people and some weird. Small town life is specific and weird, and specificity, I think, is a really good thing to kind of shoot for writing. But the other thing about it is I've gotten the chance, I was a journalist for 7 years. I probably wasn't good enough to do that in New York City. And I'm sure if I did that in New York City, I would have a different, sense of writing. But I got to meet some really great people. I got to meet some true and honest weirdos. I've got bar stories till the end of my life based on those 7 years I was a journalist. I had one guy who called the paper and said, "I'm running for the president of the United States. Come to my announcement." And when I got there, he swore at me and dumped his pop on my car and ran away. Oh. That's great. It's like fantastic. That is a character, that is a person who...
Did you write him into anything?
No, I haven't yet. I'm keeping that in my pocket somewhere, and you go back to the newsroom. It's like, yeah, that didn't turn out to be anything. But Nebraska is full of some great people and some weird people, and I love the great and I love the weird, and it's also, every now and then you see two deck chairs sitting, looking at a forest, and you're like, there's something there. I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Have any of the stories from your journalism days made it into your...
Good question. I think so. I can't come up with it. I think I have at least one or two in there, but yeah, I don't remember.
You need to do a book about a journalist. Something.
I think that's pretty well covered.
Okay.
Yeah, but man, yeah.
All right, so tell us about people or authors or works that have been significant to you in your life and your writing career.
Sure. So I have kind of always been a horror guy, right? When I was a little younger and a little bit more ambitious, I tried to do a thing where I would read fiction, nonfiction, fiction, nonfiction. You get older and busier, and I've got a kid graduating high school in a couple of months, and reading time becomes a lot more scarce, so you don't read as many books as you used to. But I remember, I'll just take FantasticLand for example. One of the formats of that came from a movie and came from a nonfiction book. Dave McCullum's book about the Columbine shooting has this amazing. It's a dark read and it's a tough read, but it's got this amazing format where the beginning is also the end, the beginning is also the end, which is also the finale of the book. It's hard to describe how he puts together. It's an exceptional piece of journalism, and just finding stuff like that and saying, I'm going to steal this, that's where it came from. But my favorite authors are the ones I can never be like. The ones who are, it's like, oh, you're just on your own planet, and I love it. My favorite author I like to point people toward is Joe Lansdale. I don't know if you know Joe R. Lansdale. He is a crime writer and a sci-fi writer, and he's from Texas, and he is just Nacogdoches, Texas, and he's just so deeply Texan that it's hard to separate from anything he does. He can create a character in a sentence. He has, in the middle of one of his crime dramas, he stops and gives an aside about a tree on a guy's property that honestly choked me up. It was just he wrote a series of books called The Drive-In, where a comet flies over a drive-in and traps people in an alternate dimension, and all of a sudden people are killing each other over popcorn, and he's just the most bonkers out there writer, and I love him and can never be like him. It's like I admire Joe Lansdale because I can never be Joe Lansdale. I admire and we'll get to horror in a second, but just some of the people in horror right now are just doing such idiosyncratic work, and so those are the people that I really gravitate toward. It's like, I'm going to create my own thing, and I might have a little bit of a personality, but you are 100% personality, and I love reading that,
Yeah.
And I can't do that. Yeah. Wish I could.
Did you want to be a writer in the way that you are now from the time you were a child?
Yeah. So I think we'll get into this later, but I wrote FantasticLand because I was rounding the bend on 40. And it was a bucket list thing. It's like I want 2 or 3 books on my book stand with my name on them. That was what I wanted. And to be honest, I didn't really care. Of course, I cared if I got published. That's not true. Of course, that was the goal. But I was willing to do it for just having those books on there.
Yeah.
And being the weirdo guy who made my friends and family, read my creative writing. It's like, yeah, here, read this. And everyone's been very kind on that front. But don't go to Goodreads. But that was kind of where I started. I'd always wanted to do it, and then you get a career going, you raise a couple kids, that gets harder and harder to do.
Yeah.
And to be honest, there were other artists who were in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, there was kind of a small movement of people cheerleading for artists. Saying get out there, do your thing, and I've got a whole speech about that. But yeah, that was kind of why I started writing a little bit later in life. I'd always wanted to do it, and one of those big round numbers came along. It's like, I better do this if I'm going to do it, and then I got lucky. So.
Yeah, you did. FantasticLand's done quite well.
Yeah. I every day it's a double-edged sword of feeling very good about the success of the book and knowing authors who are better than you and smarter than you and better writers than you and deserve it more than you, who aren't going to have the success you have. It's a double-edged sword I carry around every day, and it's great. I'm glad to carry it.
Well, I think you deserve the success. Yeah. So what inspires you to write, and how do you write? How do you get accomplished? How do you fit it into your life? What's your process?
Cool.
Yeah.
The thing I've realized about process is everybody's brain is different. And I love talking to other writers because you got to figure out how they hack their brain to do it, right? I've got a thing I do where I tell the story because it's true. When I wrote FantasticLand, I wrote it primarily in two places at one of my daughter's gymnastics areas, the observation area, and in the driveway outside of my other kid's piano teacher. That was where I wrote the majority of FantasticLand. Is I knew I had that dedicated time, and I could think about it and process it and get ready. And the second they left the car, I'm like, all right, let's do this. Ever since then, I've gotten an office. The office is very nice. I have my own little processes. I tend to go hot and cold. I tend to sit fallow for a couple months, maybe 6 months, 7 months. And then when I'm writing, I'm at the point now where I let everybody know, hey, I'm working on this thing. And I try to really concentrate. I try to knock it out because a first draft's only job is to exist. And once it exists, then you can work with it and you can change it and you can do that. But when I'm doing that first draft, I tend to really try to hone in on it. I try to get about 1,500 words a day, which gives you a book in about 3 months.
Okay, great. So where do your ideas come from? And we talked about Walmart and things go wrong.
Walmart, yeah.
Is you just sort of things pop in, or
the great font of American creativity,
right.
Walmart. Yeah. No, I got. So the ideas come from a bunch of different places. My favorite ideas are the ones that are an amalgam of 2 or 3 different things, right? FantasticLand, you go to a theme park, you listen to the right song by the Killigans at the right time. You also watch, you read Dave McCullum's book on Columbine. You watch something else, you've read World War Z, that's somewhere in the back of your head, and all of a sudden all those ideas kind of congeal into something that turns into a novel, right? Those are the best ones. Like a lot of authors, I've got a laptop full of first chapters somewhere, that just never turned into books because like I said, ideas are cheap. Execution is where it's really important, and it's the good ideas are multifaceted. The good ideas come from from my processes. Like I said, everybody's brain is different, but I really think it's important as a writer and as a creative person to absorb a lot of other creative person's ideas and thoughts. And I love movies, love books, love music, love, just try to take it all in and see if any of those pop out. Idea-wise, I don't know where they come from. Just, I've got a notebook every now and then. A lot of it is like weird little moments in life. We were at an Airbnb once and I opened the empty cabinet and there was a walkie-talkie in there. Well, that's weird. Is there a story there? And it's like I've got a whole outline to a book about that. I don't know if I'm ever going to write it, but weird walkie-talkie in Airbnb, that sort of thing. Yeah. And I haven't found the other pieces of art that are going to congeal that into a novel yet, but maybe it will someday.
So something just strikes you and you write it down, and it might turn into something. It might not.
100 little scraps of paper all over the place, and then you find them later, and you're like, oh, that was fun. See, I don't know if I can turn that into anything, but maybe. So,
Great. We talked about this a little earlier. I'm sort of newer to the genre. So what would you recommend other than your books, which I would recommend if you're new to the genre, for someone who wants to read horror?
All right. The thing that's awesome about horror, I get my horror pitch. All right. Right now, everything is being served. Right? If you are a fan of historic fiction, there are horror books for you. If you are a fan of haunted houses or, psychological thrillers. If you like Pride and Prejudice, I can draw you a straight line from Pride and Prejudice to Sundial by Catriona Ward. I can, if you like romance, horror and romance all over the place. One of the best books I've read in the past 5 years was called The Har, Haar, by David Sondergren. And it is a story about an elderly woman who is widowed and who developers are coming to take her house. and it is this. It's set in Ireland. He's an Irish writer, and it's this beautiful portrait of a town. And then she meets a Cthulhu-like sea creature that can take the form of her dead husband, and they have a romance, and she gets to rekindle a romance. And in the middle of it is some of the nastiest body horror you've ever seen in your life, because this thing is a terror, and it just rips people apart. And it is one of those things where it's like, these are two very disparate ideas, but they congeal into something just beautiful. I love that book. But my point is that horror is very diverse right now, and there are a lot of very good authors right now. We were talking about Stephen Graham Jones. I would throw Paul Tremblay in the mix. I was telling you his author photo. He's wearing a Nebraska shirt. I still haven't been able to ask him why, but he does. He does great haunted house stuff. You can find nastier stuff if that's what you're looking for. You can find tamer stuff. It's just, there really is just a glut of very, very good writers out there. And some of them are doing their own thing. One of my favorites that I talk about a lot is a guy named Jeff Strand. He isn't signed by anybody. He doesn't have a publishing house behind him. He just puts out a ton of books, and they're all funny and great. If you like FantasticLand, I would recommend The Haunted Forest Tour, which is this book about demons that come to Earth, but they settle in a forest. And of course, we being people, we build a train around it so you can go in and look at the demons. And isn't that fun, you know? And then of course, they break out and terrible things happen. There's just so much good horror out there. And so I would encourage people, the community is extraordinarily welcoming. At least it has been to me. I have found nothing but kind, good people in horror spaces, which seems counterintuitive, but it's what I find. And if you ask for recommendations, they're going to be nice and they're going to find stuff for you. Book Talk, TikTok and Instagram are fantastic places to go for horror. Sadie Hartman, who's kind of one of the leading critics in the space, wrote a book called 101 Horror Novels to Read Before You Die. And they're all, it's got that fantastic just spectrum of colors all over the place. And horror is just one of those things where it's easy to look down on because it's genre, but because it's genre, you can do anything with it, anything. And that's what I love about it so much, is that you can find people talking about, Joe Hill, Stephen King's kid, just wrote a horror book about a dragon. It's just weird and out there, and it's great, and I love it. Anyway,
so as a newbie, what would make you classify a book as a horror book?
Good question. So I think that's an individual definition. I put it on three things. One of them is the genre elements, right? So violence, gore, scary stuff, right? Okay, so I would put that in there. I would put, there are great trappings of horror that I think exist and should exist and are fun to play with, like people who put them, the genre, not genre stuff, but like the classifications, So you've got, Shirley Jackson will write gothic horror or historic horror, those sort of things. Finding a place to put it, and playing with the stuff that has come before is what I'm trying to say. And then just imagery. Imagery I think is important. You can tell a horror. The thing I love about a lot of horror books, not to be critical of literary spaces, but a lot of literary books, you can look at them and the covers look kind of the same, and you're not quite sure what you're looking at, there are a lot of trends, a lot of things. A horror book, it's a horror book.
Oh, yeah.
It's a horror book. There's a skeleton on the cover going, hi, and that's great. And that's kind of one of the things I love about horror is that right coming in what you're going to be getting. At no point are you going to be confused about what you're looking at. And it's like, I love that. I love it. So
Good. Okay, so what would you, and we talked a little bit about this before we started, but what would you say to an individual who wants to write and create novels and have their work published, and how would you encourage them?
Publishing is hard.
Yeah.
Like I said, I carry that double-edged sword with me every day that I was able to find a literary agent, That was a stroke of luck. I like to tell people the story also because it's true that I sent out, I think it was 150-ish queries to literary agents. I got a rejection letter back the day FantasticLand was published. It's one of those sort of things. It's long, it's a slog, it's no fun, but there are other avenues. You can, if you're motivated enough. But the motivation comes from a bunch of different places. I would say to someone looking to write right now that we are in an age where some of the most powerful, wealthy people who have ever existed are looking at you straight and saying your creativity is a bunch of ones and zeros that I can put into a computer. And I think that is garbage. I think that is, I subscribe to the Star Trek theory of infinite diversity and infinite combination. The idea that your experience and everything you are and everything that has been, that has led up to this point could have been preparing you for something that only you can produce. And that production, I get to be very privileged and sit on a best-selling book and tell people, yes, you should write your book, but darn it, you should write your book. Because the act of creation has brought me into contact with so many cool people and so many interesting ideas. And right now in my office, if you've read FantasticLand, I had a guy do me a painting of the warthogs and just give it to me, right? And it's framed and it sits above, sits behind me every time I sit down to write. The art created more art, and that is so exciting. And if that gets you excited, then you owe it to yourself to put it out there. You owe it to the world to put it out there. And I know that sounds so trite, but the act of doing something, and first off, just proving to yourself that you wrote a book. If you think you can write a book, and most people statistically think they can, once you've done that, you have something tangible that no one can take away from you, like ever. Right? It's like, I wrote this book. Yes, it might be full of plot holes and spelling errors. Yes, it might not be what I, intended. Yes, maybe the third act kind of sucks. Yes, maybe that person on Goodreads thinks I'm terrible. But you did it, and yes, maybe it gets lost in the shuffle. Yes, maybe 45 people read it. Yes, maybe it's a friends and family book. But you have that book on that shelf with your name on it, and you did that thing. And that is something no computer is ever going to be able to replicate. Right? Your thing. So, yes, write your thing. Because as someone who got lucky and was able to, and I've gotten exceptionally lucky and was able to, able to find success, and I would have been, I honestly think I can tell you I would have been happy just with those names on the book, with my name on the book, on my bookshelf, right? Yeah. And not a lot of people have read Pact, so it almost got there. But but
well,
no,
we're all going to read it now.
Oh yeah. But the act of creation is worth it, and I think if you are drawn to that, then you are the type of person who should pursue it. If you are drawn to it. Mm-hmm. And some people aren't, and it, like I said, it takes all kinds of people to make the world work. Some people are engineers, some people are Andy Weir who can research, space and all the rest of it. And I'm not that person, but yeah, write your book.
All right. So what's next for you?
So
you talked a little bit about your book, and you've moved up to Simon & Schuster, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. My agent, for the first time in our almost 10-year relationship, yelled at me the other day because I don't have a book to him. He said, so are you resting on your laurels now, Mr. Bockoven? I'm like, oh, no. So, but I do have a book coming out in February. And I will say that book is particularly mean. I hope it's, the horror is it's not front-loaded, but it's very much in there, and I'm kind of nervous about it, honestly, because it's coming out through Simon & Schuster, which I'm really excited about, and it's probably the least marketable thing I've ever written. But we'll see. We'll see if people like it, But in terms of that, so I've got that. I have been brought into contact with some very cool people, and I'm working with some of them. I've got a guy who I'm just kind of freestyling some ideas with, and we'll see if anything comes of it. Maybe not, maybe so. You never want to guarantee anything, but we're working on it, and it's cool. And my brain is working it and coming up with ideas. And I came up with something I hadn't seen in a horror movie before, and I put it in a horror movie. And that's a lot of fun. We'll probably never see it, but that's cool. And so that's going on. And then I don't mind telling you, FantasticLand has been what's called optioned. They're trying to turn it into a TV show. It's been optioned for a long time, which is a blessing and a curse, which means that every day you wake up and your life could be different, and every day you wake up and it's not. But that is a massively fantastical problem to have. I love having that problem, and so yeah, maybe they've got, I think, another 9 months to get it going. So we'll see what happens.
That is exciting.
We'll see.
That's
Yeah.
exciting. Well, great. Well, that kind of wraps up my questions. I'm sure some of you have questions for Mike. So please feel free to ask them, and do so loudly if you can. We are recording this. So.
Cool. I saw that one first, and we'll get to you.
Yeah, quick question.
Yes.
So your new novel obviously has Adam Jake's back.
Come Knocking has Adam Jake's
Yes.
back. My fifth
Yes,
novel
sorry.
does
No.
not have Adam Jake's.
No, the
yeah.
Come Knocking. Did you think you would write from his perspective again, and do you think you can see yourself doing it more in the future?
Good question. Thank you. Yes, I have another Adam Jake's novel in me. I think I know what it is. The rights get a little weird because those two novels were published through one publisher, and so I don't know if Adam Jake's proper will ever be back, but maybe an analog. I don't know. We'll see. But I would I would love to do another Adam Jake's novel, and I think I've got what it is in mind. Yeah. But it's fun because he doesn't. This is going to sound so pretentious. I apologize in advance. He doesn't want to come back. He doesn't want to do these things. I said that in Come Knocking, that he's like, I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want to be the mass casualties guy, but I'm the mass casualties guy now, So I'm hoping I can put a little twist on it that way. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned how diverse horror has gotten. I was just wondering, what are you currently liking, like for the trends and stuff?
For trends in horror, I'm trying to think. There are a couple different ways I could go. There are, I mentioned Catriona Ward. She's very good. Also, there is a really kind of fun, slightly nasty strain of trans literature right now. That like Haley Piper, for example, is very good and very mean. That's a lot of fun, and I know nothing about that, so it's really kind of cool to come into that perspective and be like, okay, I've never seen that issue played with in horror before. Of course, I know body horror. Of course, I know that sort of thing. But like the issues that come out of there, or I don't know if you saw the movie. I saw the TV Glow, which was a lot of the same sort of stuff that they're playing with, which is very cool. So I love that. I want to put it this. Stephen King is the water in which all horror authors swim, right? There's one of my favorite statistics is that there is one author who has sold more books than Stephen King, and that is God. The Bible, the Quran, the Torah. That is the only thing that's so. He is the most prolific and best-selling author in the history of the written word. And so you have to give props to Stephen King, but I had a shirt made once that went a little harder than I wanted, what says, read more horror, and then it says Stephen King doesn't count. And I don't actually believe that, because you should absolutely read Stephen King too. But just the fact that you can get out there and find the weird stuff is very cool. And it's like, not to answer your question with too many words, but when I'm that classic kid who read Stephen King too young. Right, I read it when I was 13, right, and then accidentally fell backward into Clive Barker, who is queer and who is kinky and who is like super weird. And it's like, oh, I'm in the deep end now, and I shouldn't be here, And that feeling is like the best feeling in the world. It's like I shouldn't be here. This should not be what I'm doing, and I love that about horror too. Anyway, so it's too many words. I apologize.
Are there questions for Mike?
Yes, sir.
As an outspoken fan of Pack,
Thank
without
you.
giving anything away,
You, me, and like 3 other people.
well, that might answer my question.
No, it's all right.
At the end of it, without giving anything away, I felt like it was set up for a potential sequel. Have you ever considered that?
It was there. It was going to be a 4-book arc.
Oh.
It was going to be a series, and I got the second one basically written, and the outlines for 3 and 4. And my publisher said no, thank you, which kind of sucks. But that's okay, and that doesn't mean that I couldn't revisit it at some point in the past. But it's like that book's been getting some attention lately. I don't know why. So I would love. Thank you. I would love to write. I would love to put more of them out there and see if I could, or if nothing else, just like put them on a website or something. Yeah. But that's fun because yeah. I remember where I was when I was like, oh yeah, this probably shouldn't have been my second novel. I probably should have eased into the series thing a little bit more, But series was kind of what I wanted to do at that moment. So,
What are your thoughts on Goodreads?
Goodreads is a great place to. First off, I'd never want to not give someone the opportunity to tell what they think about a book. My favorite thing I tell people about Goodreads and me specifically is if you go to FantasticLand right now, the top two. The first one is glowing. It could not ask for a better review. And the second one is 1 star that literally starts with the phrase, "This book sucks." And I'm like, yeah. And if, by the way, I'm wearing a shirt with a negative review of Fantasticland on it. It's my favorite one, where this guy said, "This book was way too gross. I didn't like it." And I'm like, yeah, I'm putting that on a shirt. But Goodreads, and anything that, yes, it's got its issues just like any place, like any online community, but I really like the ability to, first off, encourage reading, and and then I like the ability to talk about books. Ratings, it's hurt my feelings more than once, but that's okay. That's part of the job.
Do you read the reviews?
No, never.
Does your wife read them for you?
No, I do, and it's never a good time, but that's just because of how my brain works.
Yeah, sure.
You can give me 10 good reviews and 1 bad one. I'll focus on the bad one, just because it's the way my brain works. But it's yeah, I think as a community it's really good, and some people have made it, have followings, and it's like I like following some of those people, and that's good. So,
Are there other book communities that you like?
social media.
I
Find social media surprisingly, for all that it is a mistake and has been a mistake and is selling us rage. Man, there's some good good book content on there. I found a lot of good books through Instagram in particular, and TikTok has some good stuff. So
yeah. All right. Any other questions for
one more over
Mike?
there. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
You talked a little about the darker destructive side of social media, but do you feel like through either each of your books individually or all of them, is there something particular that you wanted to say in each? Like, what do you feel like you wanted to talk about?
That's an interesting question. I think it goes to, and I hate to repeat myself, but I think it goes back to that violence and hate are kind of what they sell now. At least that's the biggest thing they sell now. The idea that if you get to, this veers into politics, and I don't want to veer into politics, but just the idea that you can like 3 or 4 accounts and all of a sudden you're being fed very extreme stuff. I think that is absolutely irresponsible and needs to just be condemned and screamed about, and that sort of thing. But then again, my books are about climate too, and or 2 of my books are about climate, and it's like we're not screaming about that either. But yeah, that's the thing I think is most disturbing right now about social media is it immediately takes you into the radical pipeline. It immediately puts you into the most extreme spaces, and next thing you know, people are showing up in pizza places trying to shoot up a basement that doesn't exist. I mean that's. It's got real life consequences. And some of those real life consequences aren't even violence. It's just people feeling bad, or people being angry, or people being radicalized, or people just very much not enjoying this one wild and precious life we have because they're scrolling, I'm online all the time, but I try to get my feed to the point where it's making me happy, I don't know. So the violence is a problem. Words of wisdom. Violence bad. Yeah. Right.
Question.
Yes.
Have you so PAC takes place in Nebraska.
It does.
But I don't believe any of your other authors touch on Nebraska anymore. Do you ever think of having a thing? I recently read Buffalo Hunter Hunter, and I feel like that gothic nature of the Midwest and the Great Plains and so forth was just so beautifully touched there that
it is.
It feels like a good area to put a scary story.
Yeah, I think part of it is, there's a write what you know element, and also like I could never. Again, I love books where I can't do that, and I could never do Buffalo Hunter. That was such a good book, and Stephen Graham Jones and I are friendly. We've talked a couple times, and that book did such a good job of what you're describing. I think maybe I need to get back to Nebraska a little bit more. There's a I'll go there. Okay, so there's the band Outkast. One of their members put out an album of flute music recently and named one of the songs, I know you all wanted a rap song, but I had to go where the muse takes me. That was the name of one of his songs on his all flute album. And that's kind of where my brain goes when you mention that. It's like, yeah, I need to get back to Nebraska, but I'm going to go where the muse takes me, Yeah. Not to compare myself to great people, Yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, what about a book set in a small Methodist youth camp?
I know you. Oh my God. How are you? Oh man. Yeah, that would be a great one. I would love that book. Yeah. All sorts of bad things happen there. How are you? Oh, yeah, we'll talk in a bit.
Any other questions for Mike? He will be available to sign your books or chat with you a little bit after this. So if not, I think, thank you, Mike. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Appreciate
I really
you being here.
I appreciate it.